I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're exploring the creative process behind storytelling. And we're doing it with one of my favorite guests, one of my favorite writers. Her name is Katherine Wynne, and she has written a wonderful book. It is called A Cabinet of Dreams. It offers a fascinating look into the minds of writers as they create worlds from words. This collection of her short stories, plays, and excerpts reveal the mystery and the mysterious origins of a writer's inspiration. It is perfect for anyone who is curious about the art of fiction. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Books to Life Marketing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her amazing books. The links are below this interview. Katherine, great to have you back on the show today.
Well, it's lovely to be here. By the way, my more recent books are under Katherine Ann Wynne.
Okay.
My earlier books are Katherine Ashe, but there's another Katherine Ashe who writes quantities of romances. So on Amazon, this is all on Amazon. You would go a long, long way down the pages to find my work. Better to find Montfort and Poe under Katherine Ashe Montfort or Katherine Ashe Poe. And then there I am over at Katherine Ann Wynne with 5 more books.
Wonderful, wonderful. We'll put some of the links underneath this interview too on some of our
Great.
streaming pages so it makes it easier for the folks to find. Let's talk about a cabinet of dreams. I love that metaphor, a cabinet of dreams, because I'd imagine the compilation of all your writings in a cabinet somewhere are kind of like having a cabinet of dreams, right?
Well, that's your introduction of it is absolutely wonderful. I really thought I was going to die, and I had all these short stories and so forth that weren't published, and I said, well, I got to do something with them. So I gathered them together, short stories, short plays, excerpts from longer plays and novels, and put them together as a cabinet of dreams. And they're from all sorts of things. Some of them are actual dreams
Mm.
that I included. And I deal with the 3 different places authors get their words: reality, research, uh, fiction, imagination. And then there's a third. I like to describe it from my encounter with the playwright Romulus Linney, father of Laura Linney. And we saw, my husband Peter is a theater critic. We saw Romulus's brilliant play, The Sorrows of Frederick, about the Emperor Frederick of Germany, Austria. Well, anyway. And after the play, I went up to him and said, my gosh, Romulus, it's like you're inside his head and his heart. How did you write this? And he wouldn't say. But a couple of days later, I got a postcard from him of a Japanese torii, a spirit gate. Now, I'm not keen on the sort of woo-woo word of channeling, but that may describe how a great many historical things do come about. And it certainly is how I wrote my Poe thing. I was commissioned by the New York City Parks Department Historic House Trust to write a one-man Poe play for their cottage in the Bronx. It ended up playing for 3 years as dinner theater at the Waverly Inn. But I did my research. I had no idea what I was going to write. And one morning I woke up and said, Peter, leave me alone. I'm going to write. I sat down at my computer, got up what I thought was a couple of hours later. It was 16 hours later.
Wow.
I didn't know if what I had written was even coherent.
Mm.
The only thing changed in it is it was written to perform at Waverly Inn, and I changed that very little beginning for the print version, hardcover, ebook, softcover, available on Amazon. Katherine Ashe Poe is called An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe. At the opening of the show at the Waverly Inn, a number of Poe scholars came up to me afterwards and said, "Where did you find this?" And I could only say, the same place I find everything I write, my head. But it just flowed like I was taking dictation.
Amazing. Now,
And
were you very familiar with Poe's work? Are you kind of an expert on Poe?
not at all,
Okay.
no. But I read everything I could. I was sort of like a bee laden down with honey, with all I read of biography and Poe's works. The challenge was there are several of Poe's works, poems and short story, Metzengerstein, not the usual poems, in the play, and I had to be able to match the style of writing with the style of the actor speaking, and apparently I did.
And it's
Uh,
such a challenge because writing a play, a one-person play, is an arduous task because you're not just writing to convey information and you're not just writing to entertain the reader, you're writing to entertain an audience for performance that's going to be put on stage. And there's special, needs associated with that, drama,
mhm.
humor, insight. So that must have been a lot to craft that. Did you do it within one or two acts or three acts? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you're writing for the person who's going to be performing it,
Yeah.
and then he can reach the audience. But, well, I used commas for breathing and all kinds of things like that. We had three actors initially because it was an open-ended thing, but we ended up with Dana Watkins, whom I had seen before as the shepherd boy in Tosca at the Met. He had been the Met's principal boy soprano.
Mm.
And then a number of years had passed, and I ran into him, and he ended up doing Poe endlessly and brilliantly. But this is a very small space. The restaurant part that we did Poe at the Waverly Inn, and I mean the audience could practically reach out and touch the actor. In fact, one time a man came to the door and watched Dana's performance, and then came up to him and patted him on the back at the end of it. Said, "It'll be all right." We had some mafioso one time. The men were sitting, leaning across the table to watch him, and the women were crying. And at the end, one of these mafioso types comes up to Dana and shoves $100 bill into his pocket. So it was booked for weddings too. This is
Amazing.
not the creepy Poe one usually thinks of. This is the Poe in love with his cousin Virginia Clem from the time she was 8 and he was 21. And they were married when she was almost 14.
Wow.
And then she
So
developed,
scandalous.
oh, it was and wasn't so
Well, probably
much.
in that
I
era,
don't
it
think
probably
they
wasn't
ever
as, yeah.
I don't think they ever consummated their wedding. Very soon after it, she developed tuberculosis, of which she died. And given his seeing his mother die when he was 5, and then living with Virginia's gradual death, is what gives so much of his work that love and death tinge. So yeah.
Amazing. It's an amazing story. I mean, just what you told me right there is so compelling. So I can imagine this play is very, very gripping. Have you included that play in part in your excerpts in A Cabinet of Dreams?
The whole play may be in Cabinet of. Oh no, there's only a part of it when he's a child and watching his mother die. His mother was an actress, and that section is in A Cabinet of Dreams. There are short stories in beginning with, I think, my favorite that is titled "Dead Adelaide" or "Lord Byron's Lovely Corpse." And I toyed with the idea of writing mystery stories with the heroine Sleuth, a courtesan in the Regency period, based on a woman who was a real courtesan, but of course wasn't a sleuth. and her sidekick, who is a Barbary ape, who is dressed by Beau Brummel. So it's fun with a lot of uh, Byron in it as a very dashing character with his good friend, who is a courtesan. So then there's a ghost story next, and I'm not going to say much about that because I don't want to give away what happens in it. But I will say this of it, that we were reading Lafcadio Hearn's ghost stories, and one of them really grabbed us, and Peter said, why don't you write an American story styled after that? So that's where Lord Byron's Lovely Corpse came from. And I didn't write any more mystery stories after that. There is actually 3 chapters of what I'd intended as a book, a novel entitled Henri and Hercule. An editor challenged me with Montfort, saying, can you write really lush description? I mean, Montfort is not strikingly lush because that wasn't the feeling of the period. So I set about saying to myself, what period would be really lush? And I came to the court in Paris of Marie de Medici and her sons, and Henri, who was to become Henry V, but was actually a prince of the Pyrenees. And that gave plenty of room for very elaborate writing. And at the end of the 3rd chapter, I said to myself, I don't want to write any more of this. I think I've written what I want. So there it is. There are excerpts from my play Johnny, which was commissioned of me by the Scranton Cultural Center for the Celebration of American Labor 2000, for the year 2000, on the life career of Johnny Mitchell, who was the charismatic boy president of the Coal Miners Union. And it deals with the coal strike of 1902. This may be classified as one of these things that just come, because I did a contract with the Cultural Center. I said, look, I've got to write in the winter. That's when I'm freest to do this. I didn't hear a thing from them. March, I have a May 1st deadline to deliver this play. March, they send me the money and the contract. I went around with this envelope in my purse, looking goggle-eyed for half a week. Finally, Peter said, well, give it a try. And by this time, I knew that the Cultural Center people had become entranced with a group that was going to do a documentary on the same period. So I said, oh my gosh, I've got to make this live play as different from the documentary as a stage play can be. And this was going to be, some of your listeners may know these huge Masonic theaters, which the one in Scranton is. And it has a very special theater, including being a huge place. But the back of the stage has a curtain that rises, an asbestos curtain, I believe, to a real ballroom with balconies around and chandeliers that come down. So I had to use that. And so I wrote the whole play in verse. While my computer was collapsing, it would come to the middle of a word and suddenly put 3 pages of spaces. And I kept doing this, literally exploding. It was an Apple. I got an Apple genius to help me with this, and it exploded her computer too. They sent me a new computer, and I finished the play with my heart in my mouth. But there it is, a full-length play in verse. It was not performed as if it was in verse. It was performed straight. But the fact that there was rhyme and meter gave it a force. And I hope that, well, what I do have in Cabinet of Dreams is the 2 miners songs when the Angry Miner and the Miner's Lullaby, when Johnny, age 6, becomes a door boy after his father has been killed in a mine collapse. And the job of the door boys was to go down in the depths of the mine, totally black, sit by a door. There were doors which would channel the airflow through the mine. And the doors had to be closed, but they had to be opened when the little train, maybe pulled by a little engine or cogs or mules, would be coming through. The door had to be opened. And there was little boys for this job. And if they fell asleep, the door would slam open and squash them. But someone in the family had to be working in the mine for the family to retain their home that was owned by the mine. So there we are. He starts at age 6 and goes to being president of the mine, the miners' union. And it was a very important moment in American history. There was socialist and communist agitation, and the miners gave up their strike for the sake of the country's unity, not to be torn apart by communism and socialism and so forth. It's a very dramatic story and fun.
Amazing.
What else is in Cabinet? Actual Dreams. Uh,
Keep a
what?
record of your dreams? Do you keep a diary by the bed where you can write them down if you wake
Oh,
up in the middle of the night?
I remembered them. One of them is terribly poignant at the moment, this moment, although I dreamt it back in about 1975 and have remembered it ever since. And it's in the book, where I'm seeing from the sky down at a beach, and people are playing, having a wonderful time on the beach. And there are these two ocean liners going by, the France and the United States. And the France keeps going, and the United States makes a right turn and comes roaring at the beach. Well, just recently, there is this issue about the United States, the SS United States, of sinking it off Florida to be part of a tourist thing of man-made reefs and coral reefs. Well, that's better, I suppose, than it being run aground in Southeast Asia and taken apart. But and one other dream at about the same time, back 1975, and it's in the book, perplexed me, but is becoming less perplexing. Again, I'm seeing from above, I'm seeing a wonderful picnic going on. People are having a wonderful time. And there are these channels through their picnic grounds. And I see these very sinister figures in black, frogmen, invading this picnic, very sinister. And then also all these bulls come rushing, like a bull market, rushing and wrecking the picnic. So what did this mean? What were these sinister frogmen invading secretly? And the bull market, we got it. I mean, what everyone says, every day in the last week or so, the Dow has been making an all-time high. So who knows? They're peculiar dreams, and I did include them. About the other two research, where particularly for journalists, they have to seek out the real stories, what is actually happening, and how they set them may be spun according to what their editor wants or whatever, but they have got to, their business is to adhere to reality as clearly as words can do it. Second is imagination. And this is a big challenge. In my work, I've worked with outlines. Even with Montfort, I would do my research, make an outline for the next 2 or 3 days' work, but not further ahead than that. But with the Fairy Garden, I wrote an entire outline and then filled it out in the next 9 months. But you have your imagination pulls up scenes or characters or what situations, and you go through them like the cards in a pre-computer, or you go through them like a computer to pick out what of your ideas is going to serve your end purpose of the story, and you eliminate the other ideas. And that's work. Uh, and you can go wrong with it. You can find later on what you chose is no longer working. You got to go back and change that to something now that you have to reimagine that works with your later work. It's a challenge writing fiction. But then there is the other thing of whatever inspiration is, that guides that too, probably. I don't know. I turn away from the word channeling, but there is the parts of writing, as I see it anyway, and the I think probably a lot of writers write by what I'm calling inspiration and are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid it will discredit them. We are very materialistic. We don't like the idea of ideas coming from somewhere else, even somewhere else than our own brains, apparently. So people are very reluctant to speak of that. And well, with Romulus Linney, he wouldn't speak of it. He sent me a postcard. So,
I think when you're
you
in
have
that space of
questions?
writing, you do feel like, you're lost in it. You feel like
Oh,
you're living
yes,
in the world that you're creating. It does
yes,
feel like it's being channeled from somewhere, maybe from the inner recesses of your brain,
that
maybe
too,
from
yes.
something you've experienced before. But it's a wonderful place to be in, right?
Well, that depends on what you're writing.
That's true. I mean,
It's a
same with
wonderful
acting.
place if you're enjoying it. It's downright scary
Yeah,
sometimes. And many writers have described situations where their characters have just taken off and done their own thing.
yeah, yeah.
But are those real people? Are they people who actually exist in some other plane than we're used to? Or what? What's happening? Writing is a mysterious activity.
What would you say to somebody who wants to be a writer, has the techniques down, understands all of the literary techniques and so forth, but is not getting it on the inspiration part? What do you think somebody can
Oh,
do to enhance their imagination, their creativity, and their vision for what goes on the paper?
gosh. And that's a real issue because I have wanted to write more books and not written them. I was going to write a sequel to Montfort and chose not to write it, uh, because that inspiration wasn't there. Look for something that excites you. Uh, I'd rather talk about what to do once you have your manuscript, because that is very tricky nowadays. But there are certain things I do in writing that are helpful. Like I never end my day's work when I don't know what I'm going to be writing next the next day.
Right.
I would in Montfort, I would curl up in a chair with my little Yorkie, a nicely sharpened pencil, and a tablet of lined paper. I have since turned to writing on the computer with my little now Chihuahua next to me. Uh, but originally, the vibration of the computer was not nice in my chest. But either way, but if you're going to write it with a pencil or a pen, you're going to have to put it into the computer anyway. So things work with Word program. Uh, but look through the people you know, your family. Is there someone who inspires you? Or riding the bus or something? Look at the people and make up your own stories about them. Don't stare at them too much or they'll glare back. But that's an exercise for the imagination, is making up stories of people you see and you know nothing about.
Out there in the marketplace, experience life, become engaged, talk to people, talk to strangers, find out their stories.
Mhm.
I think that's a lot of it as well. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to talk to you about
Wow,
a
this went
fairy.
fast.
That's when a conversation's good. It's unbelievable that it goes that quickly. But let's talk about a fairy garden a little bit. Let's give the folks at home an overview of the work.
Oh, well, I had a fine art print publishing company that went under. And to escape from it, I had been in England the previous summer and I got back my photographs from that. And I looked at these pictures and said, if there are fairies anywhere, they're in the North Canonry Garden of Salisbury Cathedral. And I sat down and wrote an outline. It then led to Montfort because I kept coming back to the year 1258 when Salisbury Cathedral was consecrated. This is a book about real fairies, by the way, and the whole world of spiritual seeing and being able to live in that world and the day-to-day world at the same time. The what happened was I kept coming back to 1258. I got out my Britannica, what was happening in England in 1258, the Barons' War, led by Simon de Montfort. Pulled out the Britannica, looked up Simon, and was shocked at how kind of negative it was about a man. It admitted, created Parliament, and thus created modern democracy. Well, I kind of put this aside. A couple of weeks later, I was at the opening of our local library and I saw a book down the aisles, went down, opened it at random, and it was a description of Simon's death at the Battle of Evesham. And I said, well, this is what I'm going to do next. And that was the beginning of 35 years of research.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, you created a masterpiece during those 35 years of research, and we have talked about it extensively in a past interview. But let's tell the folks at home, we have a couple more minutes, about Montfort. He was the man who created the parliamentary system, but tell us a little bit about his life.
Well, he was French. He arrived. He grew up in the court of Paris of King Louis, who we recognize as Saint Louis. He was befriended by King Henry III of England. I, tracing the evidences, believe he then became the Queen's lover and the father of the heir to the throne, Edward I. King Henry had loved him, wanted him dead. Oh, and before this happened, Simon and King Henry's sister, Eleanor, who was a nun, fell in love and married with the king's blessing, but not too easy getting the Pope's blessing. But he did eventually. But the story really follows this murderous intent on Henry's part to kill this man whose natural son has blocked Henry from having a child who can be King of England. And it's a very tense story, full of, I think there's something like 19 battles in it, love stories, all kinds of stuff. It was on Amazon Historical Novels bestseller list for 30 weeks back in 2014. It's been around a while, but it still sells, and I might be dealing with a film possibility soon.
That's what I was going to ask you. If you were to take any of your works, which would you like to see turned into a film?
Oh, Montfort. Back in 2006, Duncan Clark, who was then CEO of Columbia TriStars, wanted to do it with Johnny Depp as King Henry.
Wow.
But then Clark left Columbia and didn't have the money to do it with his own company. So it sat there. He had me write 4 screenplays for it. I
Mm.
delivered the last one to him by hand in Hollywood. But there it is. It's available, and I hope it does get made.
Ready to go. You've got the screenplay and alternate versions ready as well. The
Oh,
book
and
we've
we
been
have an audio. Excuse me.
wonderful. You got an
Yes,
audio version of the book?
yes,
Oh, great. Is that available on Audible?
yes. All
Okay,
three
wonderful.
volumes, and the fourth will be in just a very few days
Wonderful,
with
wonderful. So
Christopher Hendrick, who has the most luscious voice in the world.
great. Well, that's a wonderful way to enjoy this book. And sometimes it's wonderful having a book read to you. Get a different perspective, like you said, when you hear an actor's voice reading it. And I think that's terrific. So congratulations about that. The book we focused on primarily today, Katherine, of course, is a prolific writer and she's got many out there. So look her up and look at the links below this interview. But we've been talking about A Cabinet of Dreams. It offers a fascinating look into the minds of writers as they create worlds from words, which Katherine does so masterfully. This collection of short stories, plays, and excerpts reveals the mysterious origins of a writer's inspiration. It is perfect for anyone curious about the art of fiction. But this book can be enjoyed multiple ways. You'll enjoy each one of the works within this book, and it'll also be a great exercise for you if you're looking to get those creative juices flowing in your head. Katherine, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to be chatting with you.
It's a joy always to be chatting with you as well. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time until next time on Spotlight.